Hey guys, it's Eric. Okay, since my first Envy video was a worldwide viral sensation, 129 hits so far, going around the planet, I figured I'd do a sequel or a prequel or a partner video. You can watch them in either order, but these are 4 tips for dealing with an envious person. Now, on the basis of that title, it should be implied that I'm not speaking to anybody that's problem is experiencing envy from the inside, nor am I making light of that experience because that must be terrible. I'm talking to people that more aren't used to being the envious one, are on the receiving end of envy, and are trying to figure out how the envious person thinks and how to deal with it. It's kind of like we're a world apart. I personally, I could go on for 4 hours in a YouTube video if I wanted, just talking about my flaws and personal flaws, problems I can't solve, things I've dealt with for years, things that, I'll, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Not saying I'm perfect, but God, on behalf of merciful God, I've never had a big problem being envious, which is not to say I haven't experienced envy. I have, but I never get snagged on it. It usually comes and goes very quickly. If I experience it, it's usually just makes way for my other, dozens of issues. But envy is not something I ever have been, felt avalanche by. But it was interesting, a memorable experience I had experiencing envy from inside my own skin that I'll use to segue into my 4 tips for how to deal with an envious person. It dealt with, I worked for years as a ghostwriter and speechwriter, writing and editing documents for clients, documents, manuscripts, speeches, things like that. And I did it for a very long time, and I was always slammed with deadlines, and I was working 7 days a week, and it was very, very stressful. And I just recently stopped doing it, but or scaled it way down. It's in the later seasons still, but I remember I had one client, and the client's situation, I won't give away, too many identifying features. It was ghostwriting, but he didn't have to work. He had, I think, inherited a business from his father. So he didn't have to work, and he had a lot of money. And he inherited the business, and he had somebody else run it, and he just ran around, hiring ghostwriters to do his projects and doing a million other things. But he had no responsibility in terms of working. I'm not saying he didn't have other problems, but he didn't have my problem, which was being burned out and working nonstop. So one day we went to Whole Foods for a meeting. And as a ghostwriter, I bring my recorder, my digital voice recorder. And just to record the meeting, it was a little recorder, cost maybe 50 or 60, 70 bucks, something. And I have had a few of them over the years. One breaks down, I get a new one. And he, we did the meeting. Nothing was said about the recorder, but at our next meeting, which was at, I lived in a gated community of condominiums. There was a clubhouse. So the next time we met a couple weeks later was at the clubhouse. And he saw me take out my recorder, to get the meeting started. And he said, "Eric, do you mind if we use my recorder?" And, there had been no mention that he had a recorder last time, but of course, no problem. Use yours. Like, obviously he had bought one, so let's have it. Use yours. So he goes into his bag, and he takes out something that looks like it was like a piece of technology from Star Wars. Like it needed its own tripod. It looked like a laser gun. It was real, it probably cost $1,000, state of the art. And just that envy, that envy ruled me. I was so angry at him. It was so vitriolic. It was something of a shade of hatred, and I really don't like that word. I know it's a cliche to say that's a harsh word, but it really is. I don't like saying it, much like feeling it, but I went to a dark place because he was throwing it in my face that he had the better recorder. Maybe he was an envious person or competitive. I don't know what his story was, what would motivate him. Maybe it was just an automatic way to behave. Like, if somebody has one thing, he goes out and buys the upgrade, and it wasn't personal, but it certainly made me experience envy. And I remembered how harsh the feeling was. And I didn't show it to him. I tried not to show it to him. But throughout the meeting, I just felt a total feeling of rage, just purely detesting this individual, which segues me into the 4 tips for dealing with an envious person. Tip number 1, just remember, keeping in mind what I just said about how it feels, just picture that that's how they feel. I mean, that's how they feel a lot. They're dealing with this very dark, very out of control, very wild, hateful feeling. It might be low burning, they might be only semi-conscious of it, but it's a pretty heavy feeling. So step number 1 is to stay away from them. Have no relationship with the envious person. Just avoid it at all costs. It's tough because the reason it gets tough, you get caught up in it, is because they're envious of you. That means at some point in time or on some level, they are acknowledging your good points. That acknowledgement is what fuels the dark side, which is the envy. So you might feel drawn to that relationship because you still want that flow of positive feedback, but you're paying a tax on it, like I said in the other video, in the form of, being punished for those positive traits. So it's hard to break that cycle. There's part of you that likes them and is drawn to them and feels there's a positivity there, even a closeness or comfort. It's not worth it over the long term. The envy will get worse and worse. If somebody's in the hold, in the clutch of that particular trait, it's very hard for them to get out of it. It's kind of a sign that they're not doing much productive in their work, in themselves, whatnot, to sort of grow beyond this trait. They're more caught up in the headiness, the psychodrama of judging other people on the basis of what they themselves lack, which is just, that's their straitjacket that they walk around in. So stay away. Now, the other 3 tips exist in acknowledgement that you can't always stay away. Through work, through family, it might be unavoidable. So the first thing I would say, if you cannot stay away, which is the ideal when dealing with an envious person, is to immediately, when you're the target of envy, start honing, focusing on, and cultivating, nurturing, and nourishing that trait of yours that they are envious about, whether it's your talent, your looks, your work ethic, your relationship, with your significant other, your love, and they want the love for them. So whatever they want, whatever they're spiteful about, you trying to receive the message in your mind, it's very hard, it's easier said than done, that, wow, they just gave you a big compliment. You really are a brilliant piano player. It wasn't just in your imagination. It makes them so threatened, so envious, they go to such a dark place over it. You must really got something good over here, whatever it may be. So nurture it, cultivate it. You only have one life. You could die tomorrow. So take it as a sign when there's envy. And if you're really, really excelling in some area or another, the envy is probably coming from more than one person. That's just how the proof comes in, unfortunately, in this human system. So feed that thing you're good at. Not to make them crazy. This isn't a competition. And point number 3 is going to go into that. Just to know that you've got something great. You've got gold. They just confirmed it. So feed it. Up the discipline. Make it better. Become more of a master. Go deeper. Become stronger because you just got verification that it's great. Will it lead to more envy, more envious people, more types of contests? Of course. It's unfortunate. But become that person that makes that thing stronger because now's your chance. You just got verification that it's worth it. Number 3, as I just mentioned a moment ago, again, easier said than done. This is tough stuff. And I want to mention, I don't pretend to be that great at it. I struggle. Sometimes I'm there and I can be nonchalant. Other times I don't, I blow my cover. That's it. It's not cool. And there's eruptions and problems. But number 3, don't go tit for tat. Do not go tit for tat. In other words, the envious person comes at you, right? Like, let's put it in a real cartoonish, obvious example. You just won an Oscar. You just did something incredible, historically relevant, something that very few people accomplish. And your envious friend says, well, it wasn't, and people that know envious people are going to smile when they hear this, but the envious friend will say, well, it wasn't a very competitive year that year. I mean, there weren't a lot of good movies that year. So you winning the Oscar, well, you won it in a quiet, easy year. That's something an envious person would say to make it less threatening to them, to downplay its power, and of course, to take it away from you, rehumanize you, and diffuse you of your threat. Then, so you make a note of that. You're like, that motherfucker, I'm gonna push back. I can't, they can't get away with that because it is unjust. That's a normal reaction. So you decide, again, being cartoonish here, I'm being very obvious, but you can apply it to your own situation. You're going to become President of the United States. You're going to become President of the United States. They're not impressed with the Oscar. You're going to use them as a motivator. Now, it's really in your blood, and you'll show them. You become President of the United States. Probably takes a little while, 4 years at least. Well, that's a term. That's the length of a term. So maybe it takes 2 years. I don't want to be too hard on you. You become president. They will just say, you won't win. It won't be like the end of a movie where it cuts to the credits and there's a happy ending and you won and the envious person goes, and just goes offline and has nothing more to say. No. Unfortunately, because you went tit for tat, you played their game and you stayed in dialogue with them, they'll say the same kind of thing like, oh, well, there was a low voter turnout. That was an off year. That was that election, the media didn't cover it the way they used to, and low turnout. So yeah, okay, congratulations, I guess. You could become President of the United States. Less than 50 people have done it so far. that would be the reaction from an envious person. Do not go tit for tat. I know if you're watching this video, you got here for a reason. There's an experience you had that probably you relate to what I just said. They hit you, you go, okay, well now, they just hit me. Well, now I'm going to do it twice as good. Boom, I hit them back. But they're not going to go away. They're just going to criticize. You're a snake eating its own tail. You don't realize that you already won at the beginning when they were initially threatened and disturbed by the good trait. You doubling down on it just makes them feel more like their world is falling apart. No tit for tat. Number 4 grows out of number 3, the final tip for dealing with an envious person. This is particularly good at the workplace, but although it does apply, if there's a relative or, some sort of, just relationship you can't avoid. Make it a very process-oriented relationship. And I'll have to explain this slightly. The envious mind is very product-oriented. What I mean by that is they're looking at end results. They're looking at superficial things. They're not looking at all the exercising and weightlifting you did. They're looking at your buff, perfect body, which they think came to you more easy than you deserved it to come to you. And they deserve the same thing and blah, blah, blah. They're looking at things from the superficial metric of social value. Like I said before, it gets heady. They're tied up in the payoff factor of things. The excellent physical appearance, the loving relationship, the award on your shelf, the high salary, whatever it is that's setting them off. So you have to deal with them day to day. It's uncomfortable because they're constantly focusing on, how buff you are, how many awards you've won, whatever the thing is that drives them up the wall. And it's a big problem. And then it's clearly out in the open because they're seeing life through that lens. You look at them, most of the time, not all the time, and I talk about this in the other video, most of the time they're clearly deficient in that area that they're fixated on of you being good at. So leave product out of the conversation. Don't tell them about the award you won. Don't tell them about the luxury vacation you're going on. Don't tell them about, the hot girlfriend showing the picture on the cell phone. Oh my God, isn't she hot? No. Process. Shh. It's boring. It's left-brained. It's basic. It's kind of stale, dull, stuffy, stiff. You have to do it. Process-oriented, more like, Jimmy, the report is good, but there's a typographical error on line 19, which is a fact. You don't tell them it's a fact. It's an obvious fact. Could you just fix that? Then it'll be perfect. Don't ever get into who has more, what the end result is. Keep it all process. Process, the day-to-day drudgery, cranking the wheel. If it's a household thing, where do you want me to put this? Do I put it in the drawer? Do I put it in the closet? Hopefully this isn't your spouse or whatever, then you need to honestly have a divorce. But, like if it's somebody in a living situation, domestic situation, you can't get out of it, or just a relative, you see them from time to time, well, what are the directions to the place we go after the restaurant? Keep it, I know this sounds crazy, but keep everything outside the realm of social currency, of who has more of what, of anything. Certainly don't tell them your good news. Don't, and again, tit for tat, don't do it to make them feel bad. Don't do it to get accolades from them. You'll never get it from them. It's never going to happen. So leave it alone. It's a shame. It's a shame that the thing that's good is bad for you is bad for them, but process, not product, process. Keeping they'll know you're keeping things from them. It'll bother them. It'll make them feel even lower. It might make them feel worse, but at least you're not exacerbating it. You know what I mean? You're not fanning the flames. Keep it in the realm of talking about practical things going on, readily observable. Oh, would you like me to hand you the butter? You're ready to do the cake? Just keep it like that. Just, no, in an area where there's no winners or losers. Take some practice, but worth it in the end. Those are my tips.